Sometimes, the most powerful stories are hidden in places we least expect. They sit quietly in forgotten corners, gathering dust, waiting, patiently, for someone to discover them. Some stories are whispered in the silence of an old house, some carved into the walls of time, and some, sealed away in an envelope, afraid to be read. This is one of those stories. It begins in a small, tired town named Woodvale. Woodvale was not the kind of place that appeared on maps. Travelers rarely passed through, and when they did, they hardly remembered it afterward. The town seemed trapped in an earlier century, its cobblestone streets cracked, its lamps rusted and dim, its houses leaning as if they were old men resting on canes. The rain had a way of lingering in Woodvale. Even when the skies cleared, the dampness clung to the air, to the earth, to the walls. It was a town frozen in melancholy. And among its quiet people was a man named Thomas Everett. Thomas was old now, though no one in Woodvale could say exactly how old. His hair was a crown of silver, his back bent, his steps uneven from a limp that time had deepened. He wore the same brown coat every day, frayed at the edges, with buttons that had seen better years. He carried a satchel, heavy with papers, though he rarely shared what was inside. The townsfolk regarded him with a mixture of indifference and mild pity. To them, he was simply the old man from the bookstore, the one who lived alone in the narrow house on the edge of town. They saw him pass by, nodding politely, but never stopping long enough to ask who he truly was. What they didn't know was that Thomas carried a secret. Every night, after the streets fell silent, Thomas sat at his desk by the window. There, from the drawer he never let anyone touch, he would pull out an old envelope. It was faded, yellow with age, the paper brittle at the corners. The ink on it had dulled, but one word remained clear, written in delicate handwriting. Thomas. He had never opened it. Not once in 50 years. To the people of Woodvale, it was a strange obsession. Why cling to an unopened letter? Why let something so small follow you like a shadow through decades of life? But Thomas knew. He knew it was not just paper and ink. It was the last connection to the woman he had once loved. Her name was Evelyn Hart. Decades earlier, Woodvale had been different. It had been alive. The sound of children's laughter filled the streets, music drifted from the town square, couples danced under lantern light during summer festivals. The air carried hope, and even the stars seemed to shine brighter. Back then, Thomas was not the bent figure he had become. He was young, with strong hands and a hopeful gaze. He worked at his father's bookstore, a narrow shop filled with the comforting smell of paper and ink. The shelves overflowed with novels, histories, and poetry that drew dreamers from every corner of town. It was there, between the rows of worn books, that Thomas met Evelyn. Evelyn was unlike anyone else in Woodvale. She had a presence that turned heads and a mind that questioned everything. She loved poetry most of all. She would run her fingers along the spines of books, selecting one at random, then read aloud lines of love and loss as though the words were written for her alone. Thomas had watched her for weeks before he gathered the courage to speak to her. When he finally did, she smiled, and that smile became the start of everything. They fell in love the way storms begin, suddenly, powerfully, without hesitation. They walked through fields under the setting sun, shared secrets under the stars, and filled the bookstore with quiet laughter. Everyone in town knew their story. Everyone believed they would marry. But life has a cruel way of interrupting dreams. The war came. Far away, yet its reach was unrelenting. Young men were drafted, their names pulled from lists, their futures stolen in the name of duty. Thomas's name was among them. He remembered the night he told Evelyn. She held his hands, her eyes brimming with fear. "Don't go," she whispered. "I have to," he replied, though his own heart trembled. "Promise me you'll come back." "I promise." And so he left, carrying her memory like a flame in the darkness of war. When he finally returned, years older, scarred, and weary, Evelyn was gone. No one told him where she had gone. The townsfolk avoided his questions, their eyes filled with pity. His parents said only, "She left, Thomas. Some things are better left in the past." But on the night of his return, he found the envelope slipped beneath his door. His name written upon it. He could not bring himself to open it. Because deep down, he was afraid. Afraid that the letter would confirm his worst fear, that she had abandoned him. That the love they shared was nothing more than a memory, fragile and forgotten. And so, for 50 years, the envelope remained sealed. One evening, as Thomas locked up the bookstore, he noticed a figure standing in the rain. A young woman, her hair damp, clutching a notebook to her chest. Her name was Clara, a journalist traveling through forgotten towns, gathering stories for a book she was writing. Clara was curious, restless, full of life. Thomas, though cautious, allowed her into his quiet world. Over time, they formed an unlikely friendship. She asked endless questions about Woodvale, about the bookstore, about the man behind the counter who always seemed lost in thought. In her, Thomas saw echoes of Evelyn. The fire in her eyes, the stubbornness in her voice, the way she leaned forward when she was curious about something. One night, Clara noticed the envelope on his desk. "Why don't you open it?" she asked. Thomas shook his head, smiling sadly. "Some doors are better left closed, child." But Clara did not relent. "Or maybe," she said softly, "some doors are waiting for us to be brave enough to open them." That night, Thomas could not sleep. Her words echoed in his mind. He sat at his desk, staring at the envelope. His hands trembled as he picked it up. His heart beat louder than the rain tapping against the window. For the first time in 50 years, he tore the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, fragile with age. As his eyes traced the words, tears rolled down his cheeks. It read, "My dearest Thomas, if you are reading this, then fate has kept us apart. I wanted you to know, I never left you. I was taken. My family forced me to leave Woodvale, far from you. But know this, I loved you, more than words can ever say. If ever life gives you another chance at love, please take it. Don't let fear chain you the way it chained me. Forever yours, Evelyn." The letter slipped from his hands. 50 years of silence broke in an instant. She hadn't abandoned him. She had loved him, all along. Grief came first. Grief for the time lost, for the years wasted in doubt. But with grief came relief. A peace he hadn't felt in half a century. When Clara visited him the next morning, he told her everything. She listened, her eyes wet with tears. And when he finished, she placed her hand gently over his. "Then don't waste the time you still have left," she said. For the first time in decades, Thomas smiled. A genuine, hopeful smile. A year later, the bookstore was no longer a forgotten corner. Thomas and Clara worked together to breathe life into it again. They opened its doors to children, to travelers, to anyone seeking stories. They hosted readings, discussions, nights where the townsfolk gathered to remember what it felt like to be part of something. Thomas became more than the old man with the letter. He became a storyteller, sharing not only the words written in books but the lessons of his own life. He taught that the past can haunt us, but it can also guide us, that unopened letters, literal or not, can weigh us down until we choose to face them. And when Thomas passed away peacefully one morning, the town gathered in the bookstore to honor him. Clara stood before them, holding Evelyn's letter. She read it aloud, her voice steady, carrying through the room. And many wept, realizing they too carried their own, unopened letters, regrets, unsaid words, unfulfilled dreams. Life gives us moments, fragile, fleeting, precious. Too often, we hesitate, afraid of what the truth might bring. But sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is open the letter. To face what we fear. To choose life, love, and hope. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, remember, somewhere out there, someone is waiting to hear your voice, your story. Don't keep it sealed away.